The desert was quiet, eerily so. Noah Walker tightened his grip on the steering wheel as the fading sun cast long shadows across the empty road. Retired at 48, Noah had taken to long drives through the Nevada wilderness to clear his mind. It wasn't peace he sought, but a way to escape the regret that lingered after his failed career and marriage. Tonight, however, his solitude would be interrupted in a way he could never have imagined. A sudden streak of light tore through the twilight sky, slashing a fiery path over the horizon. The light was too close, too fast to be a meteor. Noah instinctively slammed on the brakes. His truck skidded to a halt, dust billowing around him as a deafening boom echoed across the desert. "What the hell was that?" he muttered, heart pounding. The sky above flickered faintly, as if ripples of energy were dissolving into the atmosphere. Grabbing his flashlight from the glove compartment, he stepped out of the truck. The desert air was cold against his face, carrying an unnatural stillness. In the distance, he spotted smoke rising, a faint, silvery plume against the deepening night. Curiosity and a stubborn streak pushed him forward. He trudged over uneven terrain, rocks crunching underfoot, the flashlight's beam slicing through the darkness. As he crested a ridge, the scene below froze him in place. A sleek, metallic craft lay half buried in the sand, its edges warped and glowing faintly. The ship wasn't large, perhaps the size of a small bus, but its alien design was unmistakable, seamless, curved, and pulsating with faint, otherworldly lights. Debris scattered the area, some pieces emitting sparks or hissing with escaping gas. Noah's rational mind screamed at him to turn back, but a faint noise reached his ears, a weak, high-pitched sound, almost like a whimper. Against all better judgment, he descended toward the wreckage. "Hello," he called out, his voice shaky. "Is anyone there?" The sound grew louder, a faint, pained cry. His flashlight swept over the wreck until it landed on her. She was slumped against a jagged piece of the ship, her body eerily delicate. Translucent skin shimmered faintly in the light, showing faint patterns of veins beneath. Her violet eyes glowed faintly as they fluttered open, locking onto him with a mixture of fear and desperation. She wasn't human, her slender limbs, elongated fingers, and the faint bioluminescence confirmed that. But she wasn't monstrous either. "Help," she croaked, her voice startlingly clear, if weak. "Please." Noah hesitated only for a moment before rushing to her side. Her body felt weightless as he lifted her, and a strange warmth emanated from her skin. Up close, she looked younger than he'd first thought, perhaps the equivalent of a human teenager, though her features were impossibly alien. "You're hurt," Noah said, his mind racing as he carried her toward the truck. "We need to get you somewhere safe." Her head lolled weakly against his shoulder. "They'll find me," she murmured. "They'll come." Who's coming?" he asked, but she had already passed out. By the time he reached the truck, his hands were trembling. He placed her gently in the passenger seat, draped an old jacket over her, and started the engine. Glancing back toward the crash site, he caught sight of the distant glow of lights descending rapidly from the sky. His instincts screamed danger. Slamming the accelerator, Noah tore down the empty highway toward his remote cabin. Whatever was chasing her, he wasn't sticking around to find out. As the truck roared into the night, he glanced at the unconscious alien girl beside him. "What the hell have I gotten myself into?" he whispered. Noah's cabin sat deep in the Nevada wilderness, nestled between jagged cliffs and clusters of Joshua trees. Originally meant to be a retreat during his aerospace engineering days, it had become his full-time residence after his life fell apart. The isolation, once a source of comfort, now felt suffocating as he pulled into the driveway with the unconscious alien girl in his passenger seat. He carried her inside, laying her gently on the worn leather couch. The faint glow emanating from her skin cast an eerie light across the dimly lit room. For a moment, he stood over her, unsure of what to do next. The crash had left her battered, her strange translucent skin marred with shallow cuts and what looked like bruises. But what unnerved him most was her fragility. She seemed too delicate, too alien for his clumsy, human attempts at first aid. With trembling hands, he retrieved a first aid kit and dampened a cloth. As he dabbed at a cut on her temple, she stirred, her violet eyes fluttering open. Panic flashed across her face, and her body tensed as if she were about to bolt. Hey, it's okay," Noah said quickly, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe. No one's going to hurt you here." Her gaze softened slightly, though she still regarded him with wary curiosity. She shifted, sitting up slowly, her movements graceful but clearly strained. Where am I?" she asked, her voice weak but melodious. Her English was flawless, though her intonation carried an odd, musical cadence. "My cabin," Noah replied, sitting back on the arm of a nearby chair. "Middle of nowhere." Figured that was safer than a hospital. Her luminous eyes scanned the room, taking in the wood-paneled walls, cluttered bookshelves, and the faint glow of embers in the fireplace. She winced, clutching her side. "You need help," Noah said, leaning forward. Do you heal the same way we do? Do you need medicine?" She shook her head, her movements slow and deliberate. "I'll heal. But it takes time. My body can regenerate, but it needs rest." Noah hesitated before asking, "What's your name?" She looked at him for a moment, as if weighing whether to trust him. "Erna," she said finally. "And you?" "Noah." Erna nodded faintly. "Thank you, Noah." In the following days, Erna grew stronger, though the glow of her skin remained faint and her movements cautious. She explained little at first, speaking only in cryptic fragments. Noah, unsure how to proceed, focused on practical matters, bringing her food, water, and blankets, and making sure the cabin's windows were covered at night to prevent her faint light from being seen. One evening, as they sat by the fire, she broke her silence. "They're going to come for me," she said, staring into the flickering flames. Noah set down his coffee mug. "Who? The people who shot you down?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "My kind. The Volitions. They don't tolerate disobedience." "Disobedience?" Noah leaned forward. "What are you running from?" She hesitated before answering. "I was made for a purpose I no longer believe in. When I learned what they intended for me, I fled." "And what purpose is that?" Her luminous eyes locked onto his, and Noah felt as if she were peering straight through him. "It's better you don't know," she said softly. "For now." Frustrated but unwilling to push, Noah changed the subject. "How do you speak English so well?" "You don't look like you've been here long." "I've never been here," she said. "But we learn the languages of the planets we encounter. Communication is vital, whether for diplomacy or conquest." The word conquest sent a chill down Noah's spine, but he didn't press further. As the days turned into a week, Erna began to ask questions of her own. She marveled at the mundane items in the cabin books, a radio, even the old chess set Noah hadn't touched in years. She seemed particularly fascinated by human art, spending hours flipping through a dusty book of paintings Noah had left on a shelf. "You create so much beauty," she said one night, tracing a finger over a reproduction of Van Gogh's Starry Night. "Even though your world is so fragile." Noah chuckled, though it was tinged with sadness. "Yeah, well, we're not great at protecting it." Erna tilted her head. "Do you not value what you have?" Noah sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I think we do, but we get distracted, greed, war, all that. It's complicated." "Not so different from my kind, then," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Her words lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. One night, as they sat under the stars just outside the cabin, Erna's tone grew somber. "Noah," she began, "you've been kind to me. But I need you to understand something." He glanced at her. Her glow had returned, faint but steady, and her violet eyes reflected the starlight like twin galaxies. "What is it?" he asked. "There's a reason I fled," she said. "A reason why I can't stay here for long." Before Noah could ask what she meant, a faint hum broke the silence. His head snapped up, scanning the horizon. Far in the distance, faint lights danced in the sky, too steady to be stars and moving too deliberately to be anything natural. "They found me," Erina said, her voice trembling. Noah stood, his heart racing. "What do we do?" Erina rose beside him, her glow intensifying. "We run," she said. "But first, I need to tell you the truth." Noah's heart pounded as the distant lights grew brighter, hovering ominously above the desert. The faint hum that had first alerted him to their presence was now a low, menacing thrum, like a predator closing in on its prey. He turned to Erina, whose glow had intensified, casting faint, shifting patterns of light against the darkened cabin walls. "What do you mean, the truth?" Noah demanded, his voice sharp with urgency. Erina didn't meet his eyes. Instead, she walked to the center of the room, her delicate frame rigid with tension. "There's no time to explain everything, but you deserve to know. You've risked your life for me." Noah grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "Erina, if there's something I need to know to keep us alive, now's the time to say it." Her glowing violet eyes locked onto his, filled with a mix of guilt and sorrow. She placed a trembling hand over his. "I'm not just running from them," she said. "I'm running from what I am." Noah frowned, his mind racing. "What you are? What does that mean?" Erina took a deep, shuddering breath. "I wasn't born, Noah. I was made. My creators, the Volitions, engineered me for one purpose, destruction." Noah froze, his mind struggling to process her words. "Destruction? You mean like a weapon?" She nodded, her luminous skin dimming slightly as if reflecting her inner torment. "They call me a catalyst. My body contains an energy core capable of annihilating everything within hundreds of miles. They plan to use me as the ultimate weapon to conquer worlds, Earth included." Noah staggered back, his hands dropping to his sides. "You're a bomb?" Erina flinched at the word, but she didn't deny it. "I didn't choose this," she said, her voice cracking. "When I learned what they intended to do with me, I rebelled. I stole the only thing that could stop my detonation sequence A kill code stored in this." She reached into the folds of her tattered clothing and produced a small crystalline device, glowing faintly in her hand. It looked fragile, like it could shatter at the slightest touch, yet it pulsed with a quiet power. "This is why they're hunting me," she said. "Without it, they can't control me. And without me, they can't conquer Earth." Noah stared at the device, the weight of her revelation sinking in. "And what happens if you go off?" Erina's eyes filled with tears. "If I'm here too long, the energy inside me will destabilize. I'll detonate, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it." The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the hum of the approaching ships. Noah's mind raced, struggling to reconcile the girl he had grown to care for with the apocalyptic weapon she claimed to be. "So, what's the plan?" he asked finally, his voice hard. "We just wait for them to show up and kill us both?" "No," Erina said firmly, stepping closer to him. "You're not dying because of me. You need to take this." She pressed the crystalline device into his hand. "Find someone who can use it. There are people on your world, scientists, engineers who could understand it. They can use it to disarm others like me." Noah looked down at the glowing crystal, his grip tightening around it. "Others? You mean there are more of you?" Erina nodded, her expression grim. "I'm not the only catalyst they've created. I'm just the first. And if they succeed in deploying us, your world doesn't stand a chance." Before Noah could respond, the hum outside grew louder, and the cabin windows rattled. He glanced toward the door, his pulse quickening. A bright beam of light swept across the landscape, illuminating the cabin like a spotlight. "They're here," Erina whispered, her glow brightening instinctively. Noah grabbed her arm. "Then we fight." Erina shook her head. "You can't fight them. Not with your weapons." "I'm not leaving you to face them alone," he shouted. Erina stepped closer, placing her hands on his shoulders. "You've already done enough, Noah. You saved me when no one else would. But if you stay, you'll die for nothing." Noah's jaw tightened, anger and helplessness surging through him. "I don't care. You're not just some weapon. You're a person. You deserve to live." Tears spilled down her cheeks, glowing faintly as they fell. "I'm not what you think I am," she said softly. "But I'm grateful you saw me that way. Now, go. Please." The door shook as a loud bang echoed through the cabin. The volitions were closing in. Erina pushed Noah toward the back door. "There's a path behind the cabin. Take it to the cliffs and get as far away as you can. Hide until they leave." Noah hesitated, but the desperation in her eyes broke his resolve. "You better survive this," he said, his voice cracking. Erina gave him a sad smile. "Goodbye, Noah." As Noah fled into the night, clutching the crystalline device, he heard the sound of the cabin door splintering behind him. He glanced back just once, catching a glimpse of Erina standing in the doorway, her body glowing so brightly that it lit up the desert around her. For a moment, it looked as though she were made of starlight, standing defiant against the dark shapes that advanced toward her. Then the night exploded into chaos. Noah scrambled over jagged rocks, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The crystalline device throbbed faintly in his pocket, as if urging him onward. Behind him, the night was alive with violence. Plasma bursts lit up the sky, and the crackling sound of alien weaponry echoed across the desert. The ground trembled beneath his feet, the vibrations growing stronger with each passing moment. He couldn't bring himself to look back again. The last image of Erina standing in the cabin doorway, glowing like a star, was seared into his mind. "She doesn't have to die," he muttered through clenched teeth. "There has to be another way." But deep down, he knew she had already made her choice. Inside the cabin, Erina faced the advancing volitions, her body radiating a fierce, steady light. The lead soldier, clad in sleek, black armor that reflected her glow like shards of obsidian, stepped forward. His helmet retracted, revealing sharp, angular features and eyes that glimmered with cold authority. "Erina," he said, his voice a low growl. "You've caused enough trouble. Surrender the device, and this can end without further bloodshed." Erina stood tall, though her limbs trembled from exhaustion. "You don't care about bloodshed. You just don't want me to win." The soldier's lips curled into a smirk. "Win? You're not fighting for anyone, Catalyst. You're running. Like a frightened animal." Erina's glow intensified, and the temperature in the room rose. The other soldiers shifted nervously, their weapons trained on her. "I'm not running anymore," she said, her voice steady. "And I'm not letting you hurt him." The soldier's smirk vanished, replaced by a sneer. "You mean the human? The one foolish enough to think you were worth saving? He'll die like the rest." Erina's response was a burst of light so bright that the soldier staggered back, shielding his eyes. "No," she said, her voice reverberating with a power that shook the walls. "He'll live." On the cliffs, Noah had reached the cliffs, but the explosions in the distance made him stop. He turned around, his chest heaving, his fists clenched. He couldn't just run. Not while Erina was sacrificing herself for him. "Damn it," he growled, pacing the rocky ledge. "Think, Noah. Think." The crystalline device in his pocket seemed to pulse faster, almost as if responding to his desperation. He pulled it out and stared at it. Its faint glow danced in time with the bursts of light from the direction of the cabin. He realized then that Erina hadn't just given him a tool, she'd given him a choice. If the device held the kill code, it might stop her from detonating, but it could also deactivate her entirely, ending her life along with her destructive potential. Erina, he whispered, his voice breaking. The final stand back at the cabin, the Volitions launched their attack. Plasma bolts streaked toward Erina, but they fizzled and dissipated before reaching her, consumed by the expanding aura of energy around her. She stepped forward, her glow brightening with each step, forcing the soldiers to retreat. "You can't stop this," she said, her voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. "I won't let you." The lead soldier roared in frustration. "Then die, like the broken tool you are." He raised a cylindrical weapon, its tip glowing with a sickly green light. Before he could fire, Erina surged forward, her body bursting with radiant energy. The weapon disintegrated in his hands, and he was flung backward, crashing into the wall with a sickening thud. But the strain was taking its toll. Erina's glow flickered, and her knees buckled. She collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, as the remaining soldiers regrouped. Noah's choice. From the cliffs, Noah saw the cabin flicker with bursts of light. He knew she was losing. His hands trembled as he stared at the crystalline device. He didn't understand its mechanics, but he knew what it could do. He also knew what Erina would want. "Damn you, Erina," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You should have let me help." Taking a deep breath, he activated the device. A surge of energy rippled through the air, and the crystalline structure dissolved into a fine mist, vanishing in a pulse of light. Erina's sacrifice. Inside the cabin, Erina felt the shift immediately. The energy within her stabilized, the detonation sequence halted. Relief washed over her, but it was short-lived as she realized what it meant. Noah had used the kill code. The Volitions froze, their weapons falling silent. The lead soldier, struggling to his feet, spat a curse. "You think this changes anything?" he snarled. "You're still a failure. Your kind will still destroy this world." Erina stood, her glow fading but her resolve unbroken. Not today. She released the last of her energy in a controlled burst, enveloping the cabin in a brilliant white light. The Volitions were vaporized, their technology reduced to ash. The cabin itself crumbled, consumed by the explosion. Epilogue. Hours later, as dawn broke over the desert, Noah returned to the smoldering ruins of the cabin. The ground was scorched, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of burned metal. He searched the wreckage, calling her name, but there was no trace of Erina. In his hand, the crystalline device had reformed, though it no longer glowed. He knew its purpose had been fulfilled, but its presence felt like a piece of her had remained with him. Weeks later, Noah sat in a high-security government lab, watching as top scientists analyzed the device. It had already provided critical information about Volition technology and their plans for Earth. But Noah's mind was elsewhere. Every night, he looked up at the stars, searching for a sign of Erina. He didn't know if she had truly perished or if some part of her energy had returned to the cosmos. What he did know was that she had been more than a weapon. She had been a friend, a protector, and, in the end, a hero. And Noah vowed to honor her sacrifice by ensuring her legacy lived on.